Hello artists, this is Cindy Pope and I'm here again in the Cool Tools studio to show you a new way to set stones. I showed you how to do some bezel setting last year, but we're going to use prong settings this year, and I'm going to use a paper punch to punch the prongs. I think you'll love this project. So here are some examples of prong settings. This one I actually used the whole flower as a prong, and I made the base using my curio with an interesting pattern in the back. But the prongs I cut with a paper punch. And these ones are all using this bellflower medium paper punch. And this is available in the Cool Tools store. They've just started stocking it. And you can make these great prongs, but we're going to make this project today. I know you will enjoy this easy technique to prong set your stones. Okay, let's talk about the tools that we're going to use for this project. We're going to use rolling frames and a roller and a silicone mat to roll on top of. I'm going to use some sanding sponges. I'm going to use these disposable applicators. There's two sizes. There's actually 4 sizes of this one, but I'm going to use both types. I love these diamond tweezers. They're fabulous. The precision Princeton brush is perfect for any kind of precision work you want to do. This chisel clay shaper is my favorite shape of clay shaper. I love the scalpel. We're using a pencil for this. A brush. I like you to brush out after you sand because any little particles that get left on your piece are going to fire in place. We're going to use this little 2mm precision hole punch. You can get a whole set, but for this one we're using 2. And then I'm using a 6mm stone setting burr. And then we're using a little ball burr. These come in sets too. So there's a set of all these ball burrs. I have at least one of those. And there's a whole set of stone setting burrs. But you can buy this 6mm on its own. We're going to use a bezel rocker. We need distilled water and olive oil. This is my new template set, and it's a 3-piece set. A, B, and C, and we're just going to be using the A one for the outside shape of this, but there'll be other projects using both the other 2. We're using EZ960 because we want these prongs to be very, very strong. I like to work on tiles. I have a clay rolling video. I want a little 2-card piece of EZ960. We're going to make the prongs out of this. We're going to make those prongs using this hole punch. It's a little paper punch, used for paper, but works perfect with clay. I like to pre-make little balls using EZ960, using the silicone container. Joyce Chen scissors. And the texture plate I chose for this is, let's see, the name of it is Hieroglyphics Fine Line. And it's a really, really nice texture plate. And I take a little toothbrush to apply the oil. We also have a heating surface and a glass bowl, which we're going to use as an oven for the heating surface to dry things more quickly. Let's get started. Okay, we're going to trace our stone in order to account for shrinkage. So you're going to hold onto your stone, and then you're going to take a pencil that it has a really nice narrow end, and you're going to go straight up and down all the way around the stone. I usually do this with multiple stones, so let's do it with both. I have a whole sheet through stones, and then if they're similar shape, I'll actually write on it. If they're oval or not completely circular, I mark the top and the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the copy machine, and we're using EZ960 today, so we're going to increase this by 110%. So it'll be the proper size when we actually set our stone. And here it is 110%, and I'm going to cut this out. And we're going to use it as a mask. Okay, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I cut out this 110% copy. Be sure you don't cut out 100% because you want the stone to fit when you're done. So this is my 110% copy. I'm going to use it as a mask. to mask the part where the stone's going to sit. I'm going to roll out the outside shape, and the way I'm going to choose which one I'm going to do is I'm going to put that 110% copy in a couple of the sizes and see which one I want to use. And I think today I'm going to use this one. So that's the second from the largest, so that's 1, 2, 3, that's number 4. I'm going to start by rolling out my texture to 5, then we're going to roll down to 4. You can go a little thicker if you want to. I like to put a little olive oil on my template and on the silicone mat. A little bit on the roller, but this is a non-stick roller, so it needs very little oil. I also am going to oil the texture, the part that I'm going to use. There's lots of cool parts of this texture. We're going to kind of go in the middle. And I'm going to oil this little mask part. If this were, this is a little oval stone, so I know what the ovalness is on the top and the bottom, that's how I want it on the piece. But if your shape is shaped oddly, or some stones are a little smaller over here than there, mark the top and the bottom, maybe the right and the left. Anytime your stone is not symmetrical, you want to be sure you're placing it properly. Okay. Then I'm going to put that mask wherever I want it to be. Okay, so let's roll some 5-card clay. And then we roll down to a texture of 4. I like to start quite a bit higher than my rolling form. I think you press out any folds. And I roll both directions. And the backside that's been on the Teflon, the silicone, is really nice. So we're going to move this over here, and we're going to switch to 4 cards. We'll get a really nice texture. And make sure the circle is in the center of this piece when I put it down. I do want the template to cut properly. And then I'm going to give it a nice strong roll each direction. That'll give you a lovely texture with no ghosting. And then I like to press down around where I know just in case you missed a little bit. To cut, I like to move over onto a tile. When you take it off the texture, you want it to kind of fall. So let me put a little oil on this tile too. You want it to fall off, then you're not going to distort it at all. There we go. Beautiful. Then we're going to cut number 4. I figure out where I want it to be. I make sure that especially with an up and down texture, you want to be sure you're up and down. And it doesn't really matter, like if there's something up here at that texture, sometimes something is just really charming, you can move it up or down, but I'm going to try to center it across the fattest part of this template. Once I've got it, I'm going to hold it down. We'll take our scalpel. Okay, it's not quite centered. Usually I get my face right down on top of it. There we go. And this glides really nicely over the tile. You're putting pressure against the side of this template. And the edges are smooth, so it cuts really, really nicely. And the edges are not pulling up at all. So it's a really nice cut. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pull up this paper. Last time I did this, the paper stuck. So this is where we're going to put the stone, so it'll be a nice flat surface. So let's go ahead and put it on the drying surface, and then we will cut our back hole. Okay, we've completely dried our piece. Ooh, very hot. We're going to put it on the tile, and then we're going to let it cool a little bit. It's most fragile when it's really, really, really hot. So whenever I use sheet or anything, I never use it straight off the heating surface. So we're going to let it cool, and tiles cool things really quickly because they are heat sinks, I think. And let me show you one tool I didn't show you about is the clay keepers or clay cutters. And this is the teardrop set, and I really like it because I think it looks nice with this. So I always like to put a hole in the back. 2 reasons. Number one, the back is more attractive, especially if the back of your stone is attractive. And also it saves silver. There's no reason you need a full back in silver. I suppose if your stone was translucent, you might make some different decisions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that hole, and I'm going to use the second biggest clay cutter. And I'm going to go right in the center. And you certainly can use a round hole punch or really cut your own shape. You can make something really, really unique. But I'm going to try to get right in the middle. And then I'm going to rack it. Not quite straight. Maybe I'll use the next one up too. Necessity is really the mother of invention, so almost everything in metal clay you can fix. There we go. So I'm going to take the scalpel and fix this. I got a little bit of a crack there, and I'm going to repair that. You know, repairs are part of metal clay, preferably before firing. You can repair anything after firing too, but it's better, nicer to repair things before. Okay, so I've got my opening. I'm going to look in the back, and then I'm going to take this crack, and let me show you how I fix cracks. I'm going to take a little bit of the clay, and I'm using straight clay, because if you repair a crack with slip or something with a lot of water on it, it's not going to fill. The water will keep evaporating, and then your crack will start showing again. So you have to use straight clay, and this is where a clay shaper is a must. So I'm going to separate a little bit with my fingers. Let's get a little water. I'm going to take my little tiny Princeton brush because I want to get that wet, so it's going to accept this clay. And then the clay shaper is going to push that clay down in the crack. So lots of pressure because you want it to go down in. I add clay a couple times. And this is how this is actually exactly how I do it if I get a crack after firing too. So you don't want it just on the surface. You want to get down into that crack. I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to do the same thing right there. And this is hardly viewable, but I really feel even if it's not really noticeable, it might be more noticeable after firing. So it's always a good idea to fix. And this is luckily, it's in a very unobtrusive spot. And if you don't fix it, the crack could actually get bigger when you fire. I used to get annoyed about cracks after firing and things like that, but I really don't anymore. It's just kind of like a challenge. And this clay shrinks 10%, so you will not get, I've never gotten a firing crack, but on higher shrinkage clays, you know, you do get cracks because of firing stresses because it's shrinking so much. So now I'm going to take one of these little things and just smooth it out. This won't show at all under here, so the stone's going to be there. And last thing, I will go in and look at that at the very end and make sure I don't need to do a little bit more filling. If it sinks in as it dries, you just overfill. And the back especially, overfilling, a crack, and then sanding it down is better than underfilling. Okay, so now let's make our prongs. Okay, now we're going to create the prongs. Our setting is all ready. I'm going to take this paper punch, and this is what I use to create these prongs. And I'm gonna do 5 because I might actually, you know, one might go wrong, I might break one. So I'm gonna go as close to the edge as I can to make best use of this clay. And then I'm going to push the button, and there she goes. Now I want these prongs all to be exactly the same. The way I do that is I cut straight on the same line to a point. And then I turn it over because I'm right-handed. I cut better right-handed. So there's our first prong. As long as you keep the angle right, they're all going to be essentially the same. And this little point is underneath, so it's not hugely different. But I think this is a really, I tried a lot of different of my paper punches, and I really liked this bellflower one. I think it makes beautiful prongs. Cool Tools got the larger one in stock too. So if you had a bigger stone, you would want a more substantial prong. I'm going to cut 4 maybe, just in case I have a problem. And obviously I can use these on my next project too. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, on this one I thought it'd be really cute to do a little hole in each one. A little extra visual interest. So I'm just going to punch those holes. The rule with these punches, and you could use a ball burr and make an even smaller hole. This is the 2mm precision punch. You want to be 2 millimeters at a minimum away from any edge. The thinner the clay, the easier it's going to be. Obviously try to center it. So I am not going to go right up here next to the top. That would not be good. And I usually mark my holes because I can't find the center of things for my life. And slow and steady. Perfect. We're going to do that 4 more times just so we have 4 prongs available to us. I'm going to try to get in the same spot. It's not really noticeable because they're across from each other if I messed up with getting it in the same spot. What I'm doing is I'm choosing the fattest part of the prong and using that. Okay, so these little dots can be used for something else if you'd like to put them as embellishments on, or you can reconstitute them. I prefer the half round faux rivets. So what we're going to do is we're going to set these, and I like to set them for a round stone like this. I like to have 3 sets of prongs. You certainly could do more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little mark where I want to put it. I'm going to take that pencil and just, because once you get it attached, if you've got it in the wrong place, it's not easy to move it. I have scraped one off and cut a new one, and so these 2 I want to be right across from each other. So 1 at 2 and 1 at 10. You want to watch that the angle is the same, because that will look a little off also. Okay. Now we're going to get these ready to put on. And what we need to do for this is we need to sand the back of it, and then we need to start to bend it. Flexible clay becomes more flexible as you sand it a little bit. I'm not sure exactly why, but it is a fact. Now we're not removing a lot of material. I don't want you removing material. So then I'm going to wiggle it a little bit. I'm going to look at the, I've already set the stone, so I'm going to look at the curve of this stone, and I'm going to try to find one of my tools. I like the clay shaper to start bending it around. Now, we don't curve it right away. We are going to go nice and slow. We're going to get it to start to curve, and once you get the curve started, it'll bend on its own. You're going to hold it a little bit because that'll help set it. And we're going to do that with the other prongs. Now this one is off a little bit. I do want the points right under each other. There's one, and we're going to do the other two. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tweezers, I think. So the stone is going to go right up to where I've masked. So right here is where I want to put that first prong. I want the edge of the prong to be right on that line, because then that's where we're going to set the stone. You don't want it too far out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of water. We're going to make some dirty water here, not real goopy slip. Maybe thin slip, how about that? I'm going to wet the place that the prong is going to go. And again, this is not going to show. So you don't have to be as neat as you would be with something that's going to show from the outside. Use that whenever you're reinforcing in any of your metal clay work. You know, you can be messy in places that you're going to cover up, and you can get really nice joints that way. So I'm going to hold this upside down, and we're going to put some thin slip on the edge. Don't bend it after you wet it. For some reason with the flexible clay, if you try to wet it first and then bend it, you're not going to be able to get the same curve. I'm going to put this on with the tweezers because I can't get it in place by hand otherwise. So anytime we add an overlay, you never push it down until you're sure you have it right in the right place. I'm going to move it in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to push it down with this back of these tweezers. And I'm just going to hold that curve so the curve doesn't go away as I'm pushing it down. I'm not bending it though, I'm holding it. So there's our first prong. At this point, since this little bit is not going to be seen, I'm going to reinforce this a lot. And this is where our little Princeton brush is going to do well, because it's going to get right in there in the edges. I'm actually kind of working the prong down onto the base. Okay, so let's do the second prong and third prong, and then we'll dry it and we'll do a little reinforcing and put a bail on. Okay, so let's while our piece is drying, let's get our bail ready. I'm going to teach you a little pinch bail. And this is very easy to make, and it's very unobtrusive, but I think it's very delicate and really enhances the design. You can make it as thick as you want. I'm going to cut this one with an 8mm punch. If your clay sticks inside, you can blow it out. I'm going to push this down, and I'm going to thin this one up a little bit. Don't want it quite this big. Just going to slice off a bit, and then I'm going to round it. Okay, so now my piece and the prongs are dried, and I've reinforced the prongs a couple times. So now I'm going to flatten out the top so it's easier to attach this bail. So I'm going to just sand it a little bit flat. I'm going to take my applicator and we're going to wet this so it'll receive that bail very nicely. Okay, I'm going to round this up a little bit more. I like to dip this in the slip to wet it because it attaches so much nicer. Watch your prongs when you're doing this. I kind of hold it in the middle. So we're going to put it right in the center. Before you do anything, make sure you are in the center. And then I like to pinch it up at the top. I like it a little thinner on the top. It looks more delicate. And then I'm going to smooth clay onto the dry. So what I'm doing is I'm making the two pieces one. Adding wet to dry can be a little dicey. So you really have to make sure the joint is good. And once you've got that done, you're going to put it back on the drying surface. And let this totally dry, and then we'll shape it and drill a hole in the middle. Okay, I'm going to handle this really carefully because I don't want to break those prongs. So I'm going to hold it down here where the prongs aren't, and I'm going to start to drill this hole. So I start with a tiny little ball burr, just as a pilot hole. You can do this with a Dremel. I just prefer to do it by hand. I like to go slow and steady. Okay, so I've got a pilot hole. I'm going to use a bigger burr to go a little bit larger, and then we're going to use the stone setting burr and the scalpel. That's my stone tools. You don't want to get really, really thin at this point. I'm going to thin it up with the scalpels, but I just want to enlarge the hole a tiny bit. And this time I'm going to put my finger underneath. And once you've got a pilot hole, it goes really fast. Then we're going to take this burr, and it's going to just make the edges beautiful. Not just for stone setting anymore. These are great for making your holes look fabulous, and we're also thickening up or thinning up the edge. Let's see how I can get it so I'm supporting it. So once you've done a little bit of that, let's brush it off. And at this point, I'm just going to take the scalpel and I'm just going to thin it up in certain parts. Scalpel takes off this flexible clay in an amazing way. You know, if you're having a hard time sanding something, try using a scalpel. It's a really nice alternative. I'm going to make sure both sides are pretty close, and they are. And this one had it flat back with a curve. So you can really change the shape of these as you refine them. Last thing I do is I take, and we're just going to smooth the inside with water. Water sanding sometimes is a lot faster than other kinds of sanding. Now I'm going to add some decorative balls, because I can't really help myself from doing that. I like to put one at the top and one at the bottom. This one is dual purpose. Putting a ball here is going to make this bail connection more secure. So I'm going to take my tweezers, and I have my box of balls that I created using the precision hole punches. I have them in every clay and every size. And these do not have to be the same size. I think I'll put a bigger one up at the top. Right there. And you can see, if you have a black patina, the balls look really pretty. They really stand out. I think I put a couple offset in the edges also, but today I'm just going to put 2 on. We're going to put them in water, move them around with our Princeton brush to hydrate them. Then I'm going to add a little bit of dirty water. Because there's a texture under here, I'm using a little bit more slip than I normally do for this. A lot of times I just use water, but there's a texture there, and it's a fine texture. And then we're just going to pop it on there. Don't push it down until you're sure it's in the right place. And then I'm going to push it down with the back. Make a great connection. This one's going to go up at the top. I've got 2 there. Let's go with this one. A little lower profile. But you could never, this is the best way to rehydrate it, because you could never, with a little paintbrush, get it wet. So I think that's really the best way to do it. And it's amazing the inside doesn't get wet. Otherwise, if the inside was getting wet, it would smush when we add it. But it's still pretty firm. There we go. So you want to be sure it's touching the bail, because that's that's another connection for this bail to be secure. And then press it down, and I'm pressing it into the bail too. Okay, we're going to dry this, and then we're going to get it ready for the kiln. Okay, I've reinforced both these dots and the prongs and dried it completely. Now what we're going to do is we are going to add something called fiber blanket right under the prongs so they don't bend back as they fire. This is a new fiber blanket that Cool Tools is carrying. It's called Super Wool, and the old fiber blanket had a lot of toxicity and a lot of warnings. This one doesn't have warnings because they've made it biopermeable. So if you do get the little silica fibers in your lungs, they're going to go through your system. Where the old school one, once you got a silica fiber in your lung, it was there for forever. So this is a great new safety product that Cool Tools is carrying. So you just tuck it in under each prong. And then we're going to fire these according to the bending EZ960 instructions on the Cool Tools website. So if you look on the Cool Tools website there, they show you 2 firing schedules, and then it says, note, if you plan to bend this, please use this schedule. That's the schedule I want you to use. Just to make sure that your prongs bend really, really nicely. There we go. We're ready to fire. Okay, we've got our bezel pusher and we're ready to set the tabs. So I'm going to gently push them and I'm holding this pretty closely. I'm going to go most of the way with all of them and then we're going to actually turn it around. Let me get from this side. We're going to turn around and then we're going to actually make sure we're even and then we're going to push them the rest of the way down. Okay, they all bent pretty well. I'm going to turn it, make sure it looks good, and then we're going to go the rest of the way. And I'm going to rock it. This is actually called a bezel rocker in the Cool Tools site. You want to make sure that stone is secure. It's wiggling a little bit, but it's secure. I'm going to push it a little bit more right here. There we go. Here's the finished piece using a paper punch to create the prongs. Thanks so much for joining me at the Cool Tools Studio. I hope this helps you set a lot of your beautiful stones. Thanks so much.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.